I think it's time to open the books on questions that have remained in the dark on the question of government investigations of UFOs. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law.
Barack Obama's top outgoing counselor stated the following on February 13th, 2015. Finally, my biggest failure of 2014, once again not securing the disclosure of the UFO files. The truth is still out there. CC, New York Times, Dow. Here's what Major Donald Kehoe had to say to Mike Wallace during an interview in 1958.
Why will the Air Force, why will the United States government withhold information from United States citizens? For what reason?
Because they're treating them like children, the way they did with the H-bomb at first, and the way they've been doing with other things. Now, I'm not attacking the United States Air Force. I'm attacking a small group in there that has been persistently keeping this from the public, just as they've kept other things.
In the following clip, journalist Stephen Greenstreet is going to give his take on UAPTF, a continuation of ATIP. It is a tax-funded UFO program, public, within the United States government. What you should notice from the clip that you're about to see, as well as the two clips I just showed you with John Podesta and Major Donald Kehoe, is that all three of these individuals are lamenting in their own way that the United States government knows a lot more about UAP than they're willing to be transparent about.
Every corporation, every government needs a public-facing part of itself, a part that interacts with the public, and they have little PR programs and they interact with branding, etc. I think UAPTF is a little bit like that. It's a public-facing, public interacting side of things. It's a UFO program. It is not the UFO program. Common sense says the most powerful military on planet Earth is not going to have objects and aerial things zipping in through their highly controlled military airspaces and going, oh, I wonder what that was, I don't know. Guess we should maybe figure it out. Oh, okay, Senator, we'll get right on that. There's no way. And especially if this has been going on for decades, there is no way there isn't already a well-established, well-funded program for UFOs. So UAPTF, fantastic. But for those of us kind of like wanting to get into the weeds and down into the nitty-gritty, let's not be placated or put all our eggs in the ATIP UAPTF basket, as it were. So, thumbs up, but keep eyes wide open.
Stephen Greenstreet's assessment reminds me of a recent tweet I made. Scientific protocol is not an excuse nor an invitation to lack common sense. Anyone who takes the time to do their due diligence, looking into the UFO historical record, including looking at all of the government documents attained through FOIA, where insiders talk about the validity of UFOs, that they may come from extraterrestrials, will quickly come to the realization that there is a legitimate chance that there are other UFO programs that have a long history within the US government studying this phenomena. And yet you have a lot of people within the scientific community and skeptics like Michael Shermer, who has actually looked into it to some extent, who will tell you that such an assessment is ridiculous. And to me, this just goes to show you that you can be very intelligent about many things, but still have a blind spot where you're missing something really huge. And of course, that ties into the second disclosure that Kekula Jallow coined, in which we learn that we're just not as smart as we assumed we were. Let's go straight to the Department of Defense press release regarding the stood-up UAPTF that occurred on August 4th, 2020. On August 4th, 2020, Deputy Secretary of Defense David L. Norquist approved the establishment of an Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, the Department of the Navy, under the cognizance of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, will lead the UAPTF. The Department of Defense established the UAPTF to improve its understanding of and gain insight into the nature and origins of UAPs. The mission of the task force is to detect, analyze, and catalog UAPs that could potentially pose a threat to U.S. national security. Christoph Spitzer made an astute point about this press release. The USAF fact sheet about Project Blue Book did not mention the word detect even one single time, but did mention reports and investigate many times, until proven wrong at least. And so it appears that the UAP task force has an initiative and capabilities that Project Blue Book simply didn't have. And this is demonstrated by the use of the word detect. And this, in my opinion, underscores that you really can't compare Project Blue Book with the UAP task force, because the UAP task force seems a lot more professional and a lot more competent and capable than the Project Blue Book outfit was. And indeed, the UAP task force is a continuation of ATIP. This escalation just shows us that we are well underway to entering, in my estimation, a post-disclosure world. In fact, Luis Elizondo has recently explained that the current task force has better resources and is far more robust than when Luis Elizondo was part of that effort. So as the result of congressional pressure, we had the commencement of UAP task force, an enormous escalation in the disclosure process. But not everyone is as enthusiastic as me that we're on a trajectory to quote unquote full disclosure. Richard Dolan, in fact, leans in the direction that we've gotten as far as we're going to go, more or less, for quite a while. Here's what he has to say about that.
Now, there are people who believe we aren't done with all of this, that there is now this kind of irresistible momentum toward genuine disclosure about UFOs, like it's a tide that can't be stopped. And I would say, well, maybe that's true. I don't think so, but maybe. The reasoning for that goes along the lines of something like, each new admission, each new revelation will lead people to asking new questions that in turn are likely to lead to new admissions, prompting more questions, until you get to the point where we see something like an avalanche of information about UFOs coming out, and that would be the end of the cover-up. So there's a logic to that position. I'm not going to deny that. And I can see why some people would believe that it can happen that way. And maybe you can call it the momentum theory of disclosure. And maybe we are actually slowly developing some kind of momentum. But I'm more inclined to think that things will not turn out that way. In fact, I would say it's quite possible that the push for more openness on UFOs may be nearing the endgame at this time.
I'm inclined to go in the opposite direction of Richard Dolan, for the simple fact that we are witnessing curiosity in high places starting to bubble up to the surface. And with the further or new transparency that the U.S. government has given regarding the validity and reality of UFOs, people now feel a permission to be curious about this phenomena, whereas before they felt threatened to do so simply because they would be ridiculed. How can you publicly be curious about something when officialdom says it does not exist? Now, officialdom is starting to change that perception. Because the fact of the matter is, as a civilization, we listen to our institutions, government being one of the biggest. And now that the U.S. government is starting to say that UFOs are real, people are feeling emboldened to ask the question. Here's a perfect example with Congressman Mark Walker expressing his curiosity to Tucker Carlson.
We spoke to a government employee who has worked on this issue who said that the U.S. government has wreckage from one of these aircraft. Do you know anything about that?
We don't know, but that's one of the 4 questions that we are asking. Is there evidence being held somewhere? Not to get too spooky once again, but if there is evidence, I believe it's important for people, specifically in my position as the ranking member of Terrorism and Counterintelligence, we need to know what this is.
Now, that interview that occurred in July of 2019 was predicated on a letter that Congressman Mark Walker sent to the Secretary of the Navy, Richard Spencer, on July 16th, 2019. Here's a key excerpt from that letter. While I am encouraged by the Navy's proactive decision to draft new guidelines for reporting, I am concerned these reports are not being fully investigated and understood. Since the decision to end the ATIP, has the department continued to both log report sightings and fully investigate the origins of the accounts? Does the department continue to dedicate resources to tracking and investigating the claims? If so, to what measure? Has the department found physical evidence or otherwise that substantiate these claims? Lastly, does the department have any information regarding private companies or foreign nations who have made significant advancement in aerophysics? Now, a lot has transpired since that interview and since Mark Walker sent a letter to the Secretary of the Navy. Not the least of which is we now know that ATIP never ended and that UAPTF is a continuation of ATIP. This is a testament to how quickly we are moving forward with the disclosure process. I don't know if Mark Walker was ever briefed on UAP, but I do know with certainty that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, as well as the Senate Armed Services Committee, were given classified briefings on UFOs. And here is an amazing quote by Rich Hoffman, a board member of the Scientific Coalition for Ufology, in which he gives a glimpse of the level of information select members of Congress were given in their briefings on UAP. Lou Elizondo told me straight out that these clips, Fleur 1 Gimbal Go Fast, are not the whole video, that in fact there was incredible evidence showing performance beyond our capabilities in the remaining portions that are indeed classified. The general public is getting just a taste, but not the full meal. The senators got the full meal in the recent briefings. The following clip is prominent Sky Hub member Bob McGuire talking about the kind of things Dr. Eric Davis said to Congress when he was giving them a briefings. But it's important to state that many people gave briefings on UFOs to Congress, including high-level officials currently employed in the U.S. government.
We haven't mentioned Eric Davis. So let me talk about Eric Davis. I am privy to an email exchange that Eric Davis is on. And in the last couple of weeks, Eric Davis exploded on this email exchange. And it's up to Eric Davis to say everything he said, but I'm going to tell you what he did say that is relevant. He said that he was an advisor to the committees and to the people investigating the incidents which everyone has made public, like the Nimitz and so forth. Eric Davis was involved as the scientific advisor in the investigation of these incidents because Eric Davis said so, and he's not accustomed to lying. The other thing is, and I'm just going to tell you right now, I am not going to say exactly what Eric said in this email exchange, but the entire UFO community would be very happy with what he said he told the committees when he testified.
When do you think that might be made public?
It's earth-shattering.
As you may recall, on July 23rd, there was a bombshell New York Times article that broached UFO crash retrievals. In that article, it is stated that Dr. Eric Davis, as early as March, gave a briefing to a Defense Department agency in which he stated, and I quote, that there were retrievals of off-world vehicles not made on this earth. Now, I know the idea of a retrieval of craft not originating from human civilization comes off as obscenely outlandish. In fact, even I, UFO Jesus, have trouble with this idea. And indeed, I would say that I'm sort of on the fence as to whether this has actually occurred. On the other hand, I'm not on the fence that there are unaccounted for machines in our skies and seas. And logic dictates that they could crash. And further, that if they crash, they could be retrieved. So maybe I'm not being completely reasonable here. And maybe indeed something did crash in Roswell. And even though many people say it didn't happen, maybe it did. And wouldn't that be apt for the shift our species is going through right now? The following clip is with former Assistant Deputy Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Chris Mellon, commenting on the comment within that July 23rd New York Times article stating what Dr. Eric Davis stated when he was giving a classified briefing to an agency within the Defense Department.
I was quoting Eric Davis. I know you're familiar with his work when I read that New York Times paragraph a moment ago. Do you believe that there are objects in our possession, broadly defined our possession, that are from something other than this Earth?
What I will say about that is that I think that assertion should be taken seriously. I'm aware of, I know Eric very well. I understand his arguments. I was present at his briefings on the Hill, and he tried to provide some leads for them to follow to enable them potentially to confirm this. It is an issue that should be taken seriously.
We have just reached the 16-minute mark, and if you are here, that proves that not all heroes wear capes. I just want to give a quick shout out to all my patrons and YouTube members for making this video possible. And check out this disclosure mask. You may want to check it out. It's in the description below. Hey, let's continue. In the following clip, Lex Friedman and Commander David Fravor discuss what would happen if it was true and it was revealed that the United States government had recovered a vehicle not produced by the hands of man with an extraordinary propulsion system and energy system, and the impact it would have upon our greatest engineers and scientists and innovators. And this goes to the heart of the opportunity cost that classifying all of this information leads to. I really wonder if those that are involved in this policy of secrecy give enough thought to how this revelation could improve the quality of life on this planet, frankly.
You know, this would be great. You know, just come out with this, find the relic of a spaceship, like pull out the Roswell wreckage if you have it. Pull out the Roswell wreckage and do it. God, it would be so nice to not have to deal with the riots in the cities. And I mean, I know it's an election year and all that, but God, it would be something, it would be refreshing to not have to turn on my TV and see everything that is just depressing in the world. To begin, holy cow, we actually do have this and we're working on this technology.
Yeah, imagine if there is a Roswell aircraft and they pull it out. Imagine the innovation that happens in the next 10 to 20 years without any more information than that. Just the innovation that happens, the look on Elon Musk's face, the look on Jeff Bezos' face, and all the brilliant engineers.
It would change the game.
It would change the game.
It would change the game completely.
In a recent interview on the Stars and Stripes platform, a former aerospace engineer, Steve Justice, who was the #2 guy at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works for quite a while, stated that sometimes the secret to innovation is knowing that it can be done. And so this cover-up has led to a lost opportunity in terms of inspiration for not only the scientific and engineering community, but in my opinion, the world at large. I think it's inspiring to have greater clarity on God's creation, the complexity and hauntingness of it. And furthermore, Commander David Fravor touched on how if they would declassify the retrieval of a non-human vehicle, if that indeed took place, it would be really refreshing. It would be something to pay attention to, as opposed to a lot of the dire news that seems to be so common in our news cycle during this year of 2020. And I think it would also lead to us getting distracted from our differences as a species and focusing on our commonalities. So across the board, disclosure, in my opinion, would improve the quality of life on this planet in the short, mid, and long term. So if you are among those fighting for disclosure, you are ultimately fighting for an increase in quality of life for everyone on this planet. I'm going to close this video out with a quote by George Knapp from a recent Rolling Stones article titled How UFO Culture Took Over America. The conversation turns to a discussion of why the government has kept quiet on the UFO issue. I think there was a real fear for years in government that they felt the public couldn't handle the news and it would lead to the breakdown of society, theorizes Knapp. And now they've been doing it for so long and dug such a hole with lies and deception, they don't know how to dig themselves out. I ask but one thing, and one thing only from you. Yes, you. Please don't forget to subscribe, and see you in the next episode.